PM on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 PM till 11 PM. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 PM till 11 PM on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 PM on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 PM for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 PM on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, good evening and welcome to Dan Wootton Tonight. Without Dan Wootton and with me, Simon Evans, standing in for the absent and dangerously complacent Dan, who, as we speak, is sunning his curves on one of Sydney's most exclusive beaches, I believe. In a packed show tonight, it's stuffed like an overindulged Christmas Labrador. We will be discussing artificial intelligence. Is it a threat, a boon, or just another flavour of hysteria over nothing? As the recent census has confirmed that the UK is no longer a majority Christian country, has Christmas become just another secular drinking opportunity, close on the heels of the World Cup, with Brits preferring a midnight pint to a midnight mass and table service to church service? We'll be discussing how to hold on to your happiness in this godless hell, mental health and intimate relationships in the cold, dark days ahead, whether having a thorough clear-out, a declutter and clean might be a part of that mental hygiene, and of course we'll be taking a look at the papers as they come in and crowning our Great Britons and our Union jackass for the evening. All this and much more, news, opinion and conversation galore. But first, we have the actual news headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Simon. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. 4 people have been injured in a suspected gas explosion at a house in Worcestershire. Emergency services were called to the incident in Evesham shortly after 5 p.m. 3 of the injured were taken to hospital. 5 neighbouring properties were evacuated as a precaution. People are being asked to stay away from the area. West Midlands Police have named a 23-year-old man killed at a nightclub in Birmingham last night as Cody Fisher. Officers were called to the Crane nightclub just before midnight on Boxing Day after reports that a man had been stabbed on the dance floor. Hundreds of people were at the club at the time. Witnesses are being urged to come forward. Well, meanwhile, Merseyside Police has vowed to be relentless in its murder investigation of a 26-year-old woman killed on Christmas Eve. Elle Edwards was shot at the Lighthouse pub in Wallasey Village while celebrating Christmas with friends and family. A 30-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. A 19-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Rail passengers are being told to expect significant disruption into the new year amid a wave of industrial unrest across the country. There were busy scenes at London's King's Cross station earlier due to the knock-on effects of those Boxing Day strikes. Members of the TSSA at Cross Country have been staging a 24-hour walkout as part of a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. At least 60 people have died and thousands are without power as winter storms continue to hammer the US and Canada. Freezing temperatures and blizzard conditions have left many areas under more than 4 feet of snow. The city of Buffalo in New York State has been hit the hardest, 28 fatalities there, with many people freezing to death in their cars. President Joe Biden declared a federal emergency. Mark Sommer is a journalist with Buffalo News. He told us people were warned not to use the roads.
There was a travel ban instituted immediately on Friday morning, but it didn't stop a lot of people from getting in their cars. Maybe they wanted to rush to relatives' houses for Christmas. Maybe they wanted to get supplies at the last minute. Whatever the case may be, a lot of people were out of their homes when they shouldn't have been, and some froze to death. It also made it really difficult for search and rescue operations and for snowplows to clear the roads because they had these scattered, stranded cars all over the place.
Well, meanwhile here, a yellow weather warning remains in place for snow and ice in the north and east of Scotland. The Met Office says freezing conditions could last until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Traffic Scotland says motorists should plan ahead with ongoing travel disruption likely. That's due to patchy ice, mainly on higher routes. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back now to Simon.
Thank you very much for the news headlines there. I don't think any of us really need to be reminded of the yellow snow warning that's been issued in Scotland. Anyone who's lived as long as I have has learned that lesson from bitter experience. So, welcome along to our Bank Holiday special of Dan Wootton tonight with me, Simon Evans, in the Dan Wootton chair. Coming up on tonight's show, in my big opinion, I will be discussing whether artificial intelligence is a threat, a boon, or just another flavour of hysteria over nothing. In the big question, we'll be having the pub versus church debate. Is a traditional religious Christmas now a thing of the past, an act of ludicrous theatrical LARPing, or does it still have a taint of spiritual value? With me to discuss this will be a pub owner, Simon Cleary, and an Anglican priest, Father Nadim Nassar. Need some motivation for a New Year's clean? Well, we have the one and only legend Aggie Mackenzie, star of How Clean Is Your House? And a hoarding show as well on this particular subject, and it's one that is very dear to my own heart. My children have an awful lot of clutter and it gets in the way of my stuff. It's that time of year again. The New Year's resolutions come in thick and fast. Do you promise yourself you'll be kinder to your body, drink less, self-love more, or will you take up some sort of gym membership in the hopes that this year everything will be different? Well, we have the best agony aunt in town, Hilary Freeman, to give you the best advice to take into 2023, perhaps with some hope of sticking to it as far as February. And with me throughout the show is my brilliant all-star panel. We have journalist and broadcaster Linda Duberly. We have legendary Olympian Chris Akabusi. This is quite a thrill for me. I spent several years in Battersea living not half a mile from Chris Akabusi's close or way. He does know it, remember, yes, it did exist. It wasn't a figment of my imagination. I'm living with a man who has his own road. And the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards. And as ever, you can give me your views, and if they're repeatable, they may well get repeated. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. So let us get on with the show. In his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, Nobel Prize-winning economist Daniel Kahneman explained his theory that there were two different systems by which the brain operates, in theory, and all being well. System 1 is fast, instinctive and emotional. System 2 is slower, more deliberative, more logical. Both serve a purpose, and catastrophe will ensue if only one mode is preferred or if one is disabled altogether. If you shut down System 1 and you're unable to react swiftly when someone throws a punch, disable System 2 and we may find we're getting into a lot more fights than we used to in the first place. News, too, comes in two speeds. Fast news is the kind that requires an instant response, block or duck. Reporting from the scene, hastily assembled briefing notes on context and possible implications, followed up, of course, on GB News by reaction and comment by the experts and the columnists. And then, more often than not, an early expiry date. The news goes stale and is quietly scraped into the bin or onto the compost heap of history. This is the kind of news that is part of the news cycle, as it is sometimes known, and sometimes it lasts only a day or two and very rarely more than a week. This is not a new idea. In fact, Wikipedia says it dates back to the 1920s, but there is little doubt that it has speeded up with the advent of 24-hour news TV reporting, social media, and our notoriously shortening attention spans as a result. Then there is the kind of news that reflects changes beneath the surface, beneath the waves, if you like, the slow-moving but powerful currents in the oceans of information we all swim in. This rarely has the potential to grab us. Without a specific event to alert our lookouts or convince our internal editors to make it the splash, these currents rarely make it onto the front pages of our attention, but they have the potential to change our world far more profoundly than the latest royal Netflix drama, madcap scheme to deter channel crossings, or a tragic but random domestic gas explosion. Many such trends, such as climate change, remain controversial precisely because they rely so heavily on modelling and speculation and lack the obvious concrete events that would not only make the news but prove the larger-scale theories correct. Others, such as demographic change, the ageing population and the decline of religion and the traditional family structure, are also easily ignored, and with some relief, to be honest, because to draw attention to them seems almost distasteful and rude, made up as they are of millions of tiny, quite properly private individual decisions. Yet, slow as they are, these are the forces that are creating the conditions in which many of the faster news items that so agitate us arise, such as crises in the health service, productivity, and the cost of living. One such change, one force that I would like to talk about today on my special day in the Dan Wootton Memorial Throne, is the growth of what is broadly described as artificial intelligence and its impact on the way we live, work and find meaning in our lives. Now, experts can argue over exactly what is and is not AI, but the capacity of machines of one kind or another, computers by any other name, to quietly take over jobs and duties that until 5 minutes ago were assumed by humans is relentless. And we need to start talking about it. Sometimes these effects would appear to be entirely benevolent. Only yesterday, for instance, several front pages carried the news that AI, in truth just algorithms, but whatever, AI would be able to anticipate how long hospital procedures would take and how soon patients could therefore leave afterwards. This, it is anticipated, would enable a more efficient use of hospital resources, especially of beds. And if this works according to a plan, only a crank could find cause to complain, of course. But what about the AI that can create what appears to be incredible original illustrations from a simple verbal prompt and looks likely to go through the world of commercial art like a swarm of locusts? What about the AI chatbots that can fulfill the functions of everything from a call centre to a tutor to an essay cheat at zero cost and are probably coming for my auto cue quite soon, with nothing left for humans to do beyond the 21st century equivalent of lift attendants wearing a hat that entitles you to push the buttons? What about radiographers, superseded overnight by programs better able to spot cancer in an X-ray than they ever can after 7 years of rigorous training, and indeed to spot more details about the patient than they even thought possible? We've all been talking about driverless cars as long as we've been talking about nuclear fusion and energy that's too cheap to meter. And the fact that they've stayed at a fixed point on the horizon has blinded us to the approach of other equally disruptive forces in our lives. No doubt they will arrive one day. But in the meantime, 1,000 less obvious tasks are being quietly automated too. Are humans going to be like the coal miners' sons who found newer, cleaner, less back-breaking work in the services industries? Or are they going to be like the horses who went to live on the farm? Are we ready to become redundant? Even if taxation on robots could be imposed on the companies that improve productivity by eliminating tiresome human beings, and that could be used to fund universal basic income. Surely Freud was not the only person to see that work and the sense of being needed, being productive in oneself, is as essential to mental health as fresh air, eye contact and touch. Learning to code is not an option for everyone. Do we really know quite where we're going here? Are we really sure it's where we want to go? So, reacting to my big opinion monologue, that last 6 minutes of brain dump, tonight we have my brilliant panel, journalist and broadcaster Linda Doobally, legendary Olympian Chris Akabusi, and the former editor of Labelist, Peter Edwards. Coming up, where did you spend... Sorry, yes. I do apologise. So, did any of you feel a stirring of some sort of agitation listening to that? Let me ask you, Chris, as my ex-neighbour in Sign Alone. I suppose athletics, at least, is probably going to be the last thing that might be replaced by computers and artificial intelligence and so on. But do you feel that there are changes and shifts in the world that are not being adequately addressed by society?
Well, actually, no. I mean, I think sport actually is definitely one of the arenas that has taken on artificial intelligence to its endpoint. Starting blocks now. Back in my day, someone would stand there and had to look, and has he gone on the B or the bang or the G or where has he gone? You know, candlelight timing. But now there's all sorts of sensors in blocks and split camera positions to telling you that yes, you've gone too faster than the human body can trigger. So you said quite a few things there that sort of tickled my dendrites.
I suppose the question is, there's a legitimate use, isn't there, of artificial intelligence? And in sport, generally speaking, of course, we see in the World Cup now a number of crucial decisions were referred to the VAR technology, which was very controversial at the time when it first came in and does, some people say, impedes the smooth flow, the momentum of the game. But when the referee is likely to send the wrong team through to the final, it's probably best to be sure if the ball passed over the line. I suppose the main threat, really, ultimately, is the extent to which sport itself could become subject to enhancements, whether people might actually be able to use technology in order to play better. I mean, we've already had people being accused of using modified anal love beads in order to cheat at chess. Do you think this is something that could, elevate hurdlers?
Well, again, you know, like... In today's world, the tracks have been modified in some way, shape or form, and so it's not a stretch of the imagination to imagine some sort of computer implants, etc., etc., etc. They help people run faster. Why you want to do that, I really don't know. But there you go. So the fact is, for me, is that we can't get away from it. Our whole world has been enhanced by it. It's for me, it is the unintended consequences when AI goes from being a very helpful, all-round thing for the human experience in this world to surveillance, voyeuristic manipulation, where all of a sudden Big Brother is not just watching you, but also manipulating you. And I think that's the challenge.
And there's an extent, isn't there, Linda, would you say, to which we seem quite keen to embrace that? A lot of people have discussed over the years who was more accurate, Orwell or Huxley. Huxley seemed to think that we would relish the convenience that came with technology and not particularly mind that every move was observed. How do you feel about that?
Look, I think that the relentless march of artificial intelligence can't be stopped. You started your monologue by talking about the health service, and there was two very big developments in the Times this morning reported, in that we saw that you now have a kind of avatar that can actually talk to people, and it's obviously not a real person, it's an animated person that can give medical advice. But it was on top of a much more important story from the same fund, actually, within the government, that was funding something called the Brainomics experiment, the project, and that actually was able to help stroke victims. It's been hugely successful in helping stroke victims who suffer the stroke and then have to get to hospital immediately, and they're scanned very, very quickly, far quicker. The scans are read far quicker than a human being can, and they can be treated almost immediately. And some of those people who have suffered severe strokes actually can leave hospital with their health restored to normal.
Well,
so
it would be ridiculous to complain about that, wouldn't it, to chafe on it? But it has some implications if you intend to become, of course, a medical practitioner. Peter, I suppose in your line of work, which, if I understand correctly, has been largely to do with political science, political commentary and so on, do you feel like the ability of the text bots, the chat bots, to create plausible dialogue and text and prose and so on, does that present a threat to your line of work even?
I don't think it does present a threat, and I think your monologue was perhaps a little bit gloomy, but I was delighted that you started with sport, because that is such a good example, you know, and it's very interesting here what Chris said, for example, could a machine teach a child to play cricket, for example, a game I love, but a notoriously complex one? Of course not, because it relies on judgment, not just of the ball and the bat and the people you're facing, but the weather and the pitch and everything else. I think there's a big difference between technology and AI. You also mentioned VAR, and I'm a football fan, we've been watching the World Cup, but of course VAR was operated by human beings.
Yes, we still have a human interface. But do you not think an artificial intelligence could have some role to play in teaching a child to play cricket if you were to analyse its bat stroke and its forward movement, and to say, oh no, you need to come forward a little bit further or lift the bat further back? That would be the sort of thing that a computer could very easily analyse the footage, couldn't it?
Well, I suspect that's a computer rather than AI. But of course, yeah, in any sport, analysis of what happens, and, you know, elite sport, which I didn't know about, but Chris does, is judged often by millimetres and milliseconds. So analysis of that kind, and Premier League football clubs use it, can be hugely helpful. And to go to the other point about can it distort sport, which I found really interesting as a sports junkie, for example, some of these things are priced in already. So, for example, in cricket, I believe in tennis, there are restrictions on your bat and your tennis racket. And, you know, if a player that's maybe a middling quality player, they or their team unearth a new technology, they can't just take it onto the court or the 22 yards immediately. There are rules around these type of things, just like there's rules around spikes and shoes in running and so on and so on. So I think whether you're teaching a child or whether you're engaging in elite sport, all these things require human oversight, and it might be a topic for another day, but the idea of using AI in the NHS, I think, is really positive, because we all, you know, we're in the middle of an incredibly ferocious debate about the future of the NHS in Britain, and I'm from the left that are very passionate about having a state-provided, state-backed service. But actually, what reform actually looks like in the NHS, we've barely got started on that. So that's a, you know, I think AI
absolutely
is a really meaningful contribution.
Yeah, systems are going to be a big part of that. Let's hope so. Coming up, where did you spend your Christmas Eve? Down the pub or in midnight mass? We'll be discussing whether society has forgotten religious tradition at Christmas with pub owner Simon Clearly and Anglican priest Father Nadim Nassar. Get the kettle on. We'll see you in 3 minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online, this is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. And it's time now for this. So, our big question tonight, has the supposedly true meaning of Christmas, the Nativity and its message of hope for mankind, has that become truly obsolete once and for all? Are we now a nation that has given up any pretense of a spiritual dimension to this holiday? And if so, have any new traditions beyond overeating, overdrinking and overstaying our welcome convincingly stepped up to fill the gap? With me now on this is pub owner Simon Clearly and Anglican priest Father Nadim Nassar. Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks to my guests for showing up in the middle of this festival of either drinking or praying and begging for forgiveness, I suppose, on either side. I can't help noticing that the three of us have certainly closely agreed on how to present ourselves on this occasion anyway. With the glasses and the grey beards, we're going for the Santa prize. Let me start with you, Simon. I assume you're not actually behind the bar as we speak. It looks like you're rather dimly lit, if that's the case. But it's a busy time of year for you, I would hope. You've just stepped out the back for a few minutes.
It is a busy time of year. We're not actually open tonight, so I have got my own glass of wine with me, splendid. Simon, which I'm sure the father won't disapprove of. Now, I see quite a lot of synergy between pubs and churches at the moment, which may be a strange thing to say. but we are two organisations that offer solace to the community. We are two places where people come to meet. We're certainly places where those that have been bereaved and those that are single come to meet other people and try to find some company. And we are also, as I'm sure the father may agree, two organisations that have suffered with dwindling numbers over the last few years.
Well, this is true, of course. Traditions of all sides are dwindling and changing, and I suppose the good book itself would warn us, and many of the world's great faith traditions warn us that things do change, and it takes a degree of steadfastness to hold your course under such conditions. Father Nadeem, would you agree with Simon's notion that pubs and churches are not so very different? He's going into Bond villain mode there.
No, he's not the villain at all. And of course, the number is dwindling, but for different reasons, of course. I think the reason for us as a church is mainly two things. We deal with Christianity as a religion, and Christianity is not a religion. And second, we deal with Christianity as the church, which is an institution. And once you institutionalize religion, you're killing it. So, and both elements, the religiosity and the people are fed up with that, and the institution, which is a man-made body or structure, also the people are fed up with it, are causing us to look at Christianity in this way. But yes, the number is dwindling. Yes, it is dwindling. But remember, the story of Christmas is, the original story is that God didn't have place in the society. So Mary gave birth to Jesus and put him in a manger, which is a wooden structure made for animals. So
well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I noticed Simon, clearly our landlord, runs a pub called The Plough, which also leans heavily, clearly, on its rural traditions in order to evoke a certain amount of bucolic charm, perhaps. Do you feel you have some connection at that level as well, Simon?
Well, I'm not as well adversed with the Bible as the father. Of course I'm not. But I have a vague recollection that Joseph and Mary presented themselves to an inn. We are an inn, when they were told that things were too full and there wasn't enough room. I would say in these days, in the declining market of pubs, if Joseph and Mary were in England now, presenting themselves to an inn with the way things are, they'd probably find a proper room now.
I think they probably would. I might even get used to the function room, perhaps. Maybe a little bit of booking ahead is always wise, even so. One thing I've noticed, and I don't think this just goes for pubs and churches, but for a huge swathe of British activity since we've come back out of lockdown, which has been like a number of months now. We've had very nearly a year out of lockdown, and yet the truth is I think many of us still struggle to remember what life was like beforehand. I think I've noticed a lot of people at this Christmas time feeling just slightly uncertain about what the traditions they're supposed to be observing are. Does that sort of chime for either of you? Simon, let me ask you that first.
Well, I have to say, Simon, that I've got some hope for Father here, because we had people in on Christmas Eve. We have a fantastic church here in Great Chesterford, and most of our customers left at 11 o'clock to attend midnight mass.
Marvellous.
Now, what's interesting is that these people probably aren't particularly religious. Many of them may not normally attend a church service, but Christmas is a time that brings people together. It reminds them of the story of Christmas, and they go along to enjoy Mass as part of the community. So I think that's still an interesting point, that even in 2022, we see them for a couple of drinks, we don't get them drunk, and then off they go to church.
Because let me ask you, Father, I hope that singing carols and hymns is a big part of the services you organise at Christmas time. That's something that does cross the the divide between the secular and the sacred, isn't it? The unifying effect on a community when they are joined in one voice. It doesn't even really matter. I mean, obviously you'll disagree to some extent, but it doesn't matter whether these are carols or whether there's, you know, roll out the barrel and knees up Mother Brown. But getting together and singing familiar songs always raises the spirits.
That's true. Music is always good for the people, and the people love a good carol service or a number of carols during the service or during the Mass. And you mentioned a very important point, which is the secular and the sacred. And I think in the sacred, God did not have a place in the society. And in the secular, also God did not have a place in the society today. So he did not find a place in the inn. And today, Christmas is just a tradition, is just going... What I remember one this year told me, your sermon, Father, was brilliant, and it will remain with me for a long time. I said, thank you very much. I will see you soon, I hope. He said, okay, I'll see you next year, because usually I come only for midnight Mass every year. So but we need to revise this tradition and bring the true meaning of hope. There are a lot of people who need hope. Not only a bit of music and a bit of singing and a gift or a toy or something. This should not just give in to the need of the economy for the people to go and buy, but actually to inject in the society the values of Christmas.
Quite true. I will just add as well, the one thing I've always thought the church was fairly good at was a reliable, if subconscious, value that it provided, was that of offering people an opportunity once a week to express gratitude for the good things that they have, because it's very easy to slip into being more aware of things that are going wrong, things you've been denied or deprived of, especially at this time of year when you're deprived of light and cold, deprived of heat, rather. The sort of regular mechanisms for expressing gratitude. And I think to some extent that comes with buying you round as well, doesn't it, Simon?
Well, I think Father would... I'm not going to put words into Father's mouth, but I'm sure he would agree that whilst we can all criticise the commercialism that Christmas has now become, it is an opportunity for the church, along with other big festivals such as Easter, to remind our community that the church is there for everybody, and offers an opportunity, whether it's successful or not, to try and get the community to engage with the church. So I understand the Father's view that it's over-commercialised. I think we all agree with that, Father. But it is a poster opportunity for the church to offer engagement. So I think we should celebrate that.
I absolutely... Listen, I think there's a very promising accord developing here. I hope we can pursue it. It wouldn't hurt, would it, in fact, if the church had a corner of the local pub in which it could sort of, you know, present a few icons and perhaps leaflets advertising what was coming up. And equally, if the landlord of the local had a barrel that was at the back of the church, you know, for those who needed a little bit of immediate sustenance after a particularly... hard sermon, one which had landed a bit too close to home. Perhaps a quick half before taking a stroll around the grounds. Do you think you could come to some sort of arrangement along those lines?
If I may, there is a slight problem there, and that is that the church gives away the wine for free, and we don't give it away for free, I'm afraid.
You only get the crackers in one flavour, though. I think you still nudge ahead on the snack front. Well, thank you very much to my guests. Sorry, sir, say it again, Father?
Simon, I said he should be a church warden if he has such a positive opinion about the church. We are proud of you, Simon. Go for it.
I think you should swap over for a couple of days. I think it'd be an interesting exercise, and it'd be interesting to see whether your regulars notice the difference as well. So, thank you to my guests, Simon Clearly, landlord of The Plough, and Father Nadeem Nassar. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. Coming up, we'll have the cleaning queen herself, Aggie Mackenzie, with us to talk through the tips and tricks of a New Year clean and why it's so important for your mental health. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just 3 minutes. Time for a swift hour.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Tonight with Dan Wootton, but without Dan Wootton and with me, Simon Evans. Now, many viewers will be very familiar with our next guest from two hugely popular decluttering shows, How Clean Is Your House and Storage Hoarders. She is here to help us decide how to make room for all our lovely new prezzies and not slip ever further into clutter hell this winter. It is, of course, Aggie Mackenzie. Aggie, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And I think just about keeping my head above water on this first escapade into full-scale presenting. We'll bring my panel in on this shortly. But firstly, let me ask you, Aggie, you are obviously a past master at identifying cluttering tendencies. My sense is that they are at their peak during the Christmas season. Loads of new stuff comes in, very little old stuff seems to go out, and the mountains grow higher and spread wider at the foothills. What's your advice?
My advice is to be ruthless, absolutely ruthless. In fact, it's it's a bit late to say it now, but it's a good idea just before Christmas to have a good old clear out to, get the decks clear for the incoming stuff. But if you haven't managed to do that, then this is a great time. But you know, that sort of time between Christmas and New Year where it's all a bit kind of quiet, unless you've gone away, to have a really good declutter and then sort all your stuff out into piles. You know, keep it if it's something that's actually worth keeping, you'll love. You might want to sell some stuff or take it to a charity shop. Actually, I've got a pile over there that actually a couple of presents in there. I know I shouldn't say that, but I think that if you don't like the presents, don't kind of contaminate your environment with them.
Yeah, or if you don't like the people who gave them to you, of course. Sometimes a present can be an unwelcome reminder of the person who gave it to you. That can be even worse. We have a sort of spare room in our house at the moment. Our daughter, who's 18, has taken a gap year before going to university next year, and she has left the place unbelievably knee-deep in clothing. I am quite sure she's forgotten most of it. Is there a legitimate authority as a parent? Am I allowed to just shove this stuff in a skip, or do I have to get her permission on that?
No, what I'd say is just keep the door shut. Don't even go in there. Just pretend it doesn't exist. Totally. Okay. It's her mess. Let her clear it up. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Pretend it doesn't. Yeah.
But I do genuinely, when people have Christmas presents arriving in our house, I do try and instill. I mean, my son, he's 15, we live in Brighton, he goes into the markets every weekend and comes back with a couple of new workwear outfits, you know, thinks he's some sort of sawmill operative in Northern Carolina or something. It's fair enough to demand that one in, one out with that kind of stuff, would you say? Is that a good rule?
Absolutely. Edit as you go.
Yeah.
Completely and utterly. Because otherwise, you just get completely overwhelmed and suffocated by stuff. And the more stuff you have, the less you can see what you have and the less you appreciate the things that you do have. Definitely, I think that's a really good rule to follow. Absolutely.
I do have one exception. Sorry to interrupt. I do have one exception I want to plead, however. Books can be consumed, books can be purchased and just put on shelves. You don't have to expect to read them, right? I buy about 10 books for every one I read, generally speaking second-hand, so, you know, it's not breaking the bank.
You know what? I actually disagree on that front. When I moved house, I had hundreds and hundreds of books, and I thought, oh, hold on a minute. If I haven't read it already, I'm never going to read it. If I've already read it, I'm not going to read it again. And so I ended up taking very few books with me, and I use the library now much more than I used to. I just don't want that clutter anymore.
When you say the library, you mean the municipal library? You don't have a room in your house that you've called the library?
Old-fashioned local library that I pay my rates for, and I use it very much.
Let me go over to the panel and get their views on this. Linda, let me ask you, are you a clutter hound? Are you immune to this kind of behaviour?
Renowned for my ability or even my prowess at housework, but I'm very, very tidy. I started tidying up this year on Christmas night. I'd had my second run at it on Boxing Day night. I had my third go at it today, and I hope to be completely shipshape and spick and span by New Year's Eve. I'll have a nice dinner, and then I'll start with a final draft of the clearing up on New Year's Day.
Fantastic. I hope to be something very similar sounding to shipshape by New Year's Eve, I have to say. Peter, what about you with the clutter? You look like a fairly neat and tidy individual, but, of course, it's quite easy to do that just with your own personal appearance, isn't it?
Well, you're saying that because I've had a shave and ironed my shirt. But no, I think if you live in a flat as I do, there's a merit in decluttering. But I think Aggie hit the nail on the head as well. She talked about decluttering, then she actually went on to say it's about clarity, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about clarity of thought and clarity of mind. And going back to the previous discussion, yes, there's one point about if you fill your house with stuff, whether that's around Christmas or birthday in everyday life, maybe you lose sight of the bigger picture and get a bit too bound up in commercial stuff, but also just having a bit of space to move can also give you a bit of space to think. So it probably is good for all of us just to throw out a little bit if we can, but don't be draconian, don't be too harsh, but just one in, one out seems perfectly sensible, especially at this time of year.
There is definitely a healthy balance, isn't there, between creating a sort of almost a hygienic, sterile atmosphere, a slightly hospital-like vibe you get in some people's rooms where no dust is allowed to settle, no item is allowed to be out of place, and that can be intimidating. But I do personally, I respond very much to things that you can see in their entirety. I find it genuinely mentally stressful to be, even in the garden, you know, I like to clear the undergrowth around, if you've got a decent tree or a shrub or like an ace or a maple tree or something like that, it's nice that it's allowed to, you can see its silhouette. I think that's important. How do you feel about that, Chris?
My garden is immaculate because I've got a gardener and he's absolutely on top of absolutely everything. My house is dog's order, a Pareto's law. 80% of my stuff in my house, if I lost it, if it got burnt overnight, I wouldn't miss it. I'm a hoarder. The last time my house got cleared out was when I got divorced in 2004. You know, I mean, I'm absolute nonsense. But what I find is, generally, I live on a 20% and have a vibrant, good, happy life on a 20%. But I'm always scared I might just need that shirt from 1995 when I was rocking it. So, you know, it's still there.
If my father has taught me, he's 93 in a couple of months' time, God willing, he's taught me one thing, it's never throw anything out. And it's not a good rule, but you come from a different time. They grew up in between the wars, you know, when if you threw out a bit of asbestos or aluminium or like a bent bit of tin wire, you know, sure enough, in 6 months' time, you might need that to fix the go-kart.
And every now and again, it works. And I mean, I'm a 60s child, and every now and again, it works. You think, where is it? I know. And, oh, my gosh, it's been here for 35 years, and finally I get to use it.
Absolutely, and you go to get it, and it's gone. Wife has thrown it out. That's probably what caused your divorce. What do you think, Aggie? Is our panel on song here? Sorry, Aggie, I was just saying, is our panel roughly on song? Anything you want to pick up on?
Totally, very, very well done. And I think that it's really important not to be too, pristine. You know, I think a house needs to be clean enough to be healthy and dirty enough to be happy. You know, don't go too mad.
Can I ask you, I mean, obviously you hosted those very successful shows, and I did particularly enjoy the storage hoarder thing because that was exactly the sort of thing I would get into, just thinking, just push it one further set down there, and that's out of sight. But do you do it in a private capacity as well? Do people invite you into their home without cameras there, thinking that you'll actually be able to sprinkle your fairy dust that way?
Yeah, and I absolutely love doing it. I really, really do. I think it's such a great feeling. It's kind of, really, you get a lot of adrenaline from doing it. And the person whose house, you know, I did it for a friend recently, and she was just thrilled, absolutely thrilled. People just have a lightness and a kind of, you can breathe a bit more easily if you've got less clutter around you.
Introduce a little bit of a supernatural element as well. I know there are some people who go around clapping into the corners of rooms to frighten the demons out and shake bells and chimes at them as well. Definitely boost your fee for that. Thank you very much for that, Aggie. We do appreciate your time coming in this holiday season. Coming up next, should we be setting ourselves New Year resolutions? Do they really work? You can probably tell from my tone my views. Joining me on this will be dear Deidre herself, Hilary Freeman. You won't want to miss any of that. We'll see you in 3 minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back. Now, New Year's is a well-known time to make resolutions, though personally I prefer to leave it till March. The deep midwinter is no time for removing creature comforts, in my view. But my next guest may have different views. She is a legend on the agony aunt circuit. Please welcome Hilary Freeman. Hello,
Hi.
Hilary. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you? Happy
Not
Christmas.
too bad. Thank you very much indeed. Happy perineum, as I like to think of this time of the year. So, how are you finding the prospect of resolutions? Do you have anything that needs resolving urgently?
Well, I was quite amused by your last conversation about clutter, because as you can probably see behind me, there's quite a lot of clutter, and I live on a boat, so it's quite important not to have too much clutter, because we might actually sink.
Isn't it called ballast?
When we moved on with all our stuff.
Yeah, it's called ballast, isn't it,
So
on a boat?
My resolution is every year to try and get rid of my clutter, but it never works.
How big is the boat? You mean like a canal boat, or are you on the high seas?
Yeah, it's a canal boat. I'm in a marina. Yeah, so it's a wide beam.
Absolutely lovely. But funnily enough, in one of the programmes that Aggie presented about the hoarders that I watched in order to prepare for that last segment, she helped a gay couple who were living on a canal boat and still accumulating clutter, and it was making life intolerable and turning their place into a fire risk. So you've been warned now.
I should get around, yeah.
You should. But seriously, is this a good time for resolutions? I don't believe it is. I think we need to be kind to ourselves in January and February and start thinking about improving ourselves in March.
Yeah, well, I think the thing about resolutions is it's a tradition, isn't it, to have a New Year's resolution in January, beginning of the year. But all you're doing is setting yourself up to fail, because it's cold, it's dark, you've got no money, it's, you know, you there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go, and you're just going to fail because you're miserable. Yeah. And what you really need is to kind of be kind to yourself at that time of year, I think.
We do understand. Sorry, we do understand a little bit more about willpower and so on these days, don't we? I think there's been some serious scientific research into it, and it is exhausting. Using willpower has been proven to have the same sort of effect as revising for exams, even just like refusing to eat the cream cake. Once it's in the fridge, I always say you may as well have eaten it because it's not going anywhere else, is it? So, I mean, I do think that, you know, if it's going to tire you out when you're feeling miserable already.
Yeah, exactly. And what you need to do is you just need to be kind to yourself and just do things that you enjoy that are simple things, and just just look forward to the future rather than putting pressure on yourself, because that's the worst thing you can do. We've got so much to be anxious about at the moment. Money worries, the war in Ukraine, still got COVID hanging along. And if people start putting pressure on themselves to be perfect, they are just going to set themselves up to be really, really pissed off and miserable.
How do you cheer yourself up on the houseboat when the evenings get cold and damp? And I would imagine a certain amount of damp does penetrate, does it? Although you look quite dry.
Yeah.
I almost am sceptical about your claims at the moment to be looking at you, but...
Believe me. Yeah, it gets very cold. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we were like under the covers with about 6 layers.
If the houseboat's rocking, don't come knocking. Is that it?
Yeah, well, it's pretty solid.
Is it?
But, we've got a couple of geese on the roof who are living on the roof above our bedroom.
A couple of what?
Certainly seem to be enjoying themselves.
A couple of what?
Geese.
Oh, geese, sorry. I thought you said police.
Yes.
OK, you've got a couple of geese on the roof. And neither of those got roasted for Christmas, so that was quite decent of you.
I'm a vegetarian, so...
Thank you so much for your time. That's been a very enlightening, and I feel just completely vindicated in my views. Thank you, Hilary Freeman. Have a wonderful 2023. We have coming up in the next hour, H from Steps, who's caused the stir by blocking what seems to be the majority of Twitter users. Why? The unsung heroes of Christmas. They will give up their holidays to help those in need. And I'll be speaking to Kylie Goldsmith about how you can do the same. Then we have the papers hot off the press at 10:30 sharp. Don't go anywhere. See you in a couple of minutes.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Simon Evans, settling into the dimples left by Dan Wootton's absence. So, in our second hour, we have at one end of the spectrum of human behaviour a deep dive into the erratic celebrity on Twitter. And at the other end, some people in my part of the world, that is Sussex, some living saints, no less, who are getting stuck in and doing what they can to help keep their community cheerful, fed and warm. But first, we have the latest news headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Simon. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. 4 people have been injured in a suspected gas explosion at a house in Worcestershire. Emergency services were called to the incident in Evesham shortly after 5 p.m. 3 of the injured were taken to hospital. 5 neighbouring properties were evacuated as a precaution, and people are being asked to stay away from the area. West Midlands Police have named a 23-year-old man killed in a nightclub in Birmingham last night as Cody Fisher. Officers were called to the Crane nightclub just before midnight on Boxing Day after reports that a man had been stabbed on the dance floor. Hundreds of people were at the club at the time. Witnesses are being urged to come forward. Merseyside Police has vowed to be relentless in its murder investigation of a 26-year-old woman killed on Christmas Eve. Elle Edwards was shot at the Lighthouse Inn in Wallasey Village while celebrating with friends and family. The 30-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. A 19-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Rail passengers are being told to expect significant disruption into New Year amid a wave of industrial unrest across the country. There were busy scenes at London's King's Cross station earlier due to the knock-on effects of Boxing Day strikes. Members of the TSSA union at Cross Country have been staging a 24-hour walkout as part of a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. At least 60 people have died and thousands are without power as winter storms continue to hammer the US and Canada. Freezing temperatures and blizzard conditions have left many areas under more than 4 feet of snow. The city of Buffalo in New York State has been hit the hardest with 28 fatalities, many people freezing to death in their cars. President Joe Biden has declared a federal emergency. And a yellow weather warning here remains in place for snow and ice in the north and east of Scotland. The Met Office says freezing conditions could last until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Traffic Scotland warned motorists of ongoing disruption due to patchy ice, mainly on higher ground. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back now to Simon Evans.
Thank you, Ray. And I see the yellow snow warning still stands in Scotland. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bank Holiday Special. Dan Wootton tonight with me, Simon Evans, in the hot seat. Not hot, I should say, with the remains of Dan's body heat. Coming up in the second hour of tonight's show, we have H from Steps. Not on the show, he has caused a stir by blocking what seems to be the majority of Twitter users, including myself. What done no one, no harm. We'll be discussing this with my fabulous panel, and I'm sure we'll find out whether he's blocked any of them too. Might be the first they know of it. Plus, we'll be talking to one of the unsung heroes of the Christmas season, Carly Goldsmith, who helped feed those at her company's food bank throughout the Christmas weekend. At 10:30, we'll be having a sneak peek at what headlines are making tomorrow's papers, and staying with me until the end of the show under contractual obligation, my brilliant all-star panel of journalist and broadcaster Linda Doobly. We have legendary Olympian Chris Akabusi and the former editor of the Labour List. So, the latest celebrity to apparently find their brain fused by the demands of maintaining a stable presence on social media is the erstwhile H from Steps, now known as Ian H. Watkins. There is always a point in a pop star's career where they decide that their early, slightly facetious moniker needs establishing on a more stable ground. Remember that Billy became Billy Piper and is now known as William Piper, which I think may be a stage too far. Anyway, it has, it seems, been too much for Ian H. Watkins. He's gone a blocking spree, blocking everyone, including, it turns out, me, as a grab from my phone when I checked. Yep, sure enough. I've never had an interaction with Ian H. Watkins. I've very rarely given the man much thought, although I did achieve a certain amount of success in the early days with a gag I did about doing security at the Brits. I said it all kicked off one year. I was the only thing between H and JK, who was famous at that time. He was the lead singer of Jamiroquai. Anyway, it was an alphabet joke. It looks better in print. Here, I have got a... as from what I understand, panel, what he's blocking people for is it seems to be in the turf wars. He has essentially come out on the side of the trans rights activists, and he has blocked anyone who has ever at any point suggested that a woman is an adult female human being, and that is, there I think is possibly some sort of block list. But can I ask you, first of all, we'll start with you, Linda. Are you active on Twitter? Do you understand the protocols? Do you give a damn about this sort of thing?
Not really. It's not something I care about hugely, although when I've had to do it as a journalist, I have done it. I published a magazine of my own until lockdown. I had to do it then. I've done it at other times. But basically, I think the whole thing is ridiculous, of blocking people because they occupy a space that you don't agree with, and them blocking you. It's such a waste of time. It really is. It's a waste of time and energy. And just very briefly, just before I came here tonight, it wasn't on Twitter, it was on LinkedIn, but I made a post in support of Afghan women who, as we know, have been banned from any education over the age of 12 this week by the Taliban. And suddenly, I've ignited some kind of gender debate on LinkedIn. Yeah. It's ridiculous. A lot of this is about, in my mind, what can you do in practical terms to make a difference to your life, and not igniting some kind of intellectualised debate. It's all a waste of time.
I mean, it does seem odd, if the implications are correct, that H has just decided to block anyone who's ever spoken in favour of sex-based rights for women. Essentially what he's doing is he's eliminating himself from the whole debate, isn't he? He's unwilling to hear any hard... I think blocking is fine, but, I mean, you may very well think that the whole, behaviour of being on Twitter more than is absolutely necessary is infantile to begin with. But if you are to spend any time on Twitter and somebody is bothering you, somebody's attacking you, somebody is exposing you to, abuse and so on, it's perfectly reasonable to block them in that situation. But to essentially just completely denounce... Chris, have you been active on Twitter? Have you pursued a public profile through that medium?
So I've been on Twitter since 2009, and when I first got on Twitter, it was a lovely little space. You got to know people, literally got to know people, and then you might meet up with a couple of those people. It was great fun.
Tweet-ups, we used to call them.
Yeah, it was great fun, and I've really enjoyed my time. But right now, I mean, I talk on Twitter to people who I know. I wouldn't even know if I've been blocked. Sometimes you do get trolled, but you just... who cares? Just let them talk. You know? Because what I find, you let them talk, and after a while, because you've not responded, they go and bug...
the beautiful thing, the facility that you have on Twitter is to mute them so that they don't know that you can no longer hear them, and then they are just screaming into space. That's a wonderful, wonderful expression. I suppose there is a suspicion that it is an important field, a domain, a territory in which political debates come and go, and especially... Obviously, the rows with Corbyn, people like Owen Jones and so on, who lead a lot of the conversation in the direction that Labour should take. Peter, is that something that you've had to sort of chew on and swallow in order to operate in those territories?
Well, I've certainly had to chew upon it, although I didn't terribly enjoy the taste. I think Twitter has a huge impact, and it's great for communication. It allows people perhaps outside the Westminster bubble to hold the powerful to account. But it is a bubble, Twitter, and actually I try and be reasonable offline in real life, and I'm pretty passive on Twitter. I do about one tweet a year, and I'm quite happy with that. And I do think if you look at big figures from British history, whether it's culture, the arts, politics, and some of them predate this time, but I think they'd be united by their indifference to social media. I think it's good for a short-term thing. Holding a decision maker, often it's corporates getting themselves into trouble, how big is your Toblerone after Brexit, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Actually, we're speaking at Christmas. Doesn't that remind us that there's a premium on human relationships, and I think they're best carried out in the flesh or over the telephone?
Absolutely, although it is interesting what Chris said there, because that certainly chimed for me. I too joined in 2009. I made some significant friendships on Twitter, and also as a touring comedian, I'm a stand-up comedian in between these kind of jobs. And I would be able to go to gigs knowing that somebody I'd been chatting with on Twitter was going to come along that night and meet them in the bar. They were almost always smaller than I expected. It's very, very similar to meeting actors, I suppose, because actually it does amplify. And this is the beauty of it. When it's done well, it allows people, regardless of their physical prowess, their capacity to intimidate or overwhelm you with, you know, a well-modulated voice and perhaps some sort of learned rhetorical powers. Some really quite mild-mannered, shy people who may even have speech impediments and so on, or whatever, can come across every bit as powerfully as a well-trained professional speaker. And that's a marvellous thing. I think, funnily enough, it is the thin-skinned show business celebrities that come out of it worst because they are revealed for being what they are, just human beings, whereas, of course, they've previously traded on the idea they might be something slightly more than that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think in 2009... when I first went onto Twitter, I mean, there was a premium for being somebody that had performed in the public sphere, and a lot of the general public, you know, get in touch and talk about, in my case, track and field athletics and where they were and how it went. And whenever there was a sporting event, if I spoke, you know, you'd get retweeted and blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, just Joe blogs. No one cares who you are, what you've done, you know, unless you are, you know, a completely different sphere. So who cares? It doesn't bug me.
It might be moving into a different stage. I mean, to be fair, in social media terms or in Silicon Valley tech terms, it's been 13, 14 years. That is a lifetime, you know. There's you know, that's as long as a lot of them can hope to last. Linda, I know you do a lot of work, you're saying, for charity and so on, and in trying to organise support for Afghan refugee women in particular, but just generally speaking, that is a danger, isn't there, as well, with Twitter, that people will think they've signed a petition, that they've done the slacktivist kind of approach. It can be a great organising tool. It can also take a lot of the steam out of a situation. People feel they've done their bit and move on, and nothing, of course, changes.
And they haven't. Of course, they haven't. I'm not saying it's wrong to engage with Twitter at all. I think Twitter can be enormously useful, particularly when you have a shortened link and it leads you to an article that is really significant and you need to read. And I think petitions are very, very useful. I think it's all about balance. I think that people should be prepared to boost their offline life alongside their online life, and that is very, very important. There's no doubt at all, and I was talking to the global media head of Save the Children only this week, and he was saying that they regard the social media as such an incredibly important tool in fighting all sorts of regimes, including the Taliban. So it does have a really good purpose, but it does depend on how you use it. And, of course, now we've got other platforms like TikTok. I mean, TikTok is so important at the moment. It's bigger than YouTube and Instagram combined in this country, and I think there are something like 18 million followers just here in the UK.
And yet, terrifyingly, TikTok, there's some suggestion that's actually a tool of a regime, that the Chinese government are having quite some powerful effect through that.
Yeah.
I don't know how true this is, but apparently the algorithms are set up in this country to waste our children's hours turned into days, turned into weeks of them just scrolling, whereas in China, children see mathematical puzzles and science experiments on TikTok, and they are not just like sort of fed like a grain lot, like being fattened up with abject nonsense. There is something very dystopian about the exposure of children to this kind of algorithm, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's all down to, as well, I think, parental contribution. I think you've really, really got to pay attention to what your child's doing, and you also have to educate yourself, and that's very difficult for people, certainly for women of my age, but even for women who are maybe a generation younger, who have young children engaging in social media. You absolutely have to know what they're doing at every step of the way, because it is a powerful tool, whatever you think of it, whether it's Facebook, well, that's kind of dying a death at the moment, whether it's Twitter or whether it's TikTok or whether
There's a new one none of us have even heard of that, as we speak, is burrowing into our child's brains. Peter, just to wind up very quickly, from a political point of view, Twitter it can be quite unsatisfying. What would you recommend to anyone who really wanted to get into politics at the moment? Should they sidestep social media and just go to meetings?
Going to meetings has been a great tradition of the Labour Party, where you sit there for hours and hours and hours debating small print. Let me tell you one thing very quickly, though. 2015, the closest general election, I think, certainly in recent memory, several parties spent a lot of money on Twitter, but actually the Tories quietly spent a lot of money on Facebook targeting at swing seats, and that was really where the Tories made their return, because I believe that had much more of an impact. Because in Twitter, of course, you're speaking to the Westminster bubble.
Yeah.
In Facebook, you're speaking to the public at large.
You are. It's all about the demographics. Coming up, we've got the papers at 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction. But before that, we will speak to a community worker who has looked after people in need over the festive season. All this and more. Back with you in just 3 minutes. Don't go away.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and welcome back. Now, my next guest is on a section we're calling Unsung Heroes, and I am pleased to confess a personal connection here. Our wonderful cleaner, Jade, told us a few weeks ago about a community initiative that she was involved in her neighbourhood that provides not only a food bank but also free hot meals cooked and waiting for those who are finding things a bit tight in these difficult times. And lots of entertainment and the like too. And we're going to talk now to the lady who runs the whole show, if I understand it correctly. We go over live to Carly in Brighton. Hello, Carly.
Hello, hi, good evening.
Lovely to see you and meet you. We spoke briefly on the phone earlier, but we've not actually met face-to-face. But we have our lovely Jade in common, who I absolutely want to credit with initiating this conversation. So she told us a few weeks ago about this this sort of kitchen and lunch service they were offering and so on, as well as, I suppose, what has become a fairly standard part of British life now, the food bank offer. Could you explain a little bit about what you've done and what you've set up?
Yeah, of course. So the Crew Club is a youth and community organisation that's been working on the Whitehawk estate since 1999, and it was established and is run by two fabulous people, Darren and Lorraine Snow. And it became really clear to us as we came out of the pandemic that the cost of living crisis combined with the impacts of COVID was having a really bad impact on local people's incomes. And so one of the things that we decided to do was to set up a community food offer, and that involves Jade, who's our community food worker. Doing 2 morning breakfasts 2 mornings a week, plus 2 lunches, 2 afternoons a week, and we have a share shop so people can come in if they're in need of some basic items, or they can bring bits in that they want to share with the shop so that other residents and other members of the Crew Club can benefit from those.
And presumably the cooks and everyone, this is all people who are doing it voluntarily, and you've got a network of people who are all helping out?
Yeah, so we have some paid staff. So Jade is a member of our paid staff who is the kind of primary person, but we rely very heavily on volunteers. So we have local people who are doing their health and hygiene certificates with us, who are supporting us through the to do the breakfast and the lunches. And so, I mean, we've been absolutely delighted by the amount of support that the community's given us.
But you were telling me that the organisation itself goes back a couple of decades now, perhaps even a little bit longer, that it's been running one way or another and gradually grown. Tell us about the origins.
That's right. So the Crew Club opened in 1999, and it was opened because of the tragic murder of a young person on our estate called Jay Kensit. And there was a group of young people who really needed a safe place to go. And so Darren and Lorraine opened up the Crew Club as a space for young people to go to spend their time after school, and it's really grown from there. So we offer 40 hours.
You were telling me earlier it was initially in very unprepossessing, like using an old abandoned changing room or something. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. It was a set of abandoned changing rooms. So its location is right by some football pitches on our estate. And we were originally in a set of very, very small changing rooms that were very leaky, had a very leaky roof. And also, you know, some nights very early on in the club, you'd get kind of 80 kids watching an episode of EastEnders in our TV room, which was, you couldn't even swing a cat in it. It was tiny.
Wow.
So yeah, we've kind of moved on from that building to a much nicer, fancier building.
So would it be fair to say if you get that many kids, these are not all necessarily kids who are really in dire need. It's a warmer, more inclusive community that, you know, you don't turn up there because you're literally being beaten by your stepdad sort of thing. This is something that's actually quite a nice default, let's go out for a night out kind of place.
No, I think it's really important to acknowledge that I grew up in Whitehawk and my dad grew up in Whitehawk, and it's a really lovely community in so many ways. But it is also the case that it is one of the 10% most deprived areas in England.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of people's lives.
And it's
so
quite
anybody
interesting,
that
isn't
lives
it?
locally,
Because you know, I mean, we live in Hove, and we're aware that Brighton and Hove has some of the highest house prices outside of London, you know, and yet well, I suppose that's like London in itself, isn't it? But there's a lot of kind of do-gooders and well-intentioned individuals who vote Green, you know, and drive an electric Range Rover. But this kind of thing is actually what makes a bit more difference to people's lives, I think.
I think it's just the thing about the Crew Club is that it's continuity. So it's been around for 24 years, and the same people have run it, and most of our employees are local, all of our volunteers are local, and so it's an organisation that's supported multiple generations of families now, and so there's an awful lot of trust in the organisation and what we do, and we generally have the best interests of local people at heart, because many of those local people are our own friends, family, neighbours, you know, people that we've ourselves have grown up around. So I feel very privileged to work there. It's got a particular way of working, which I think is really important.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm so pleased to be even, like, tendentially attracted to the whole thing. So, through a wonderful day. Thank you for coming on the show, Carly. Do you have a website or anything if people want to come and find out more about it and get in touch?
We do. You can come and visit us at www.crewclub.co.uk. And, yeah, you know, we have a great centre. If you live in the Brighton Hove area, if you live locally, do come along. We offer some really fabulous activities for people of all ages. And you can come and have one of Jade's breakfasts, which is fabulous, I can tell you.
I'm going to be there. Yeah, I will be there, and we'll do some gigs soon. OK, thank you very much, Kylie. Coming up, we have got the papers at 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction, plus my superstar panel give their Greatest Britain and Union Jackass nominations. We'll see you in just 3 minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back. It is 10:30 p.m. and it is time for the papers, hot off the press, hot out of the printer. So, a time for a look at tomorrow morning's newspapers. Thank you. The Daily Mail is top of the pile. Loyalty cards for strikers. This is a curious headline. I am not sure I entirely understand it. Union barons were accused last night of plotting a de facto general strike in the new year as they launched a loyalty card scheme designed to artificially swell picket line numbers. Peter, this feels like it's your wheelhouse.
Well, I would highlight this, but only because I want to take it down as nonsense. It's not because it's a Daily Mail, it's because it doesn't stack up. So I've been on strike in my previous life as a newspaper reporter and did that reluctantly, but anyone who goes on strike does it because they're sad or they feel underpaid or they feel they're not being listened to. And the idea that you go and support comrades either in the same industry or different industries and then that becomes a de facto general strike is nonsense. And I know we've got a lot to cover tonight, but one quick point. Anyone who goes on strike gives up a day's pay, then they do that again and again and again. And if anyone gets a tiny, tiny token or financial reward, it only compensates a fraction of their day's pay. So it's not a loyalty card, but it might actually be supporting your fellow doctor, your fellow nurse, your fellow teacher.
I have been made aware that I should have gone through the headlines in their entirety. But I'm glad that we got that out, and I think that was a very valid point anyway. We'll just go through the rest of them very quickly. The Times lead with cabinet row over Prevent anti-terror programme, and they have a picture of Rishi Sunak and his Christmas Labrador there, as mentioned in the very first intro. We also have blackmail alert after MPs are greeted by sex workers at hotel. The Telegraph have Sandhurst urged to tackle toxic culture at Sandhurst, and Taylor Swift there looking far from toxic just on the other side. To illustrate that, police failed to solve 1 million thefts in the past year. They failed to solve any bloody thefts whatsoever, as far as I can tell. The Guardian have charities forced to shut up shop as Brexit hits funding. A picture of some, look like some dragonflies or something, which should not be appearing in our National Trust gardens at this time of the year. That's a global warming story. Then we have the Mirror. Junior doctors strike fear. And Pharrell's family, please speak up. And Matt Hancock is still grimly holding on to his last 15 minutes of fame. The Independent. Rescue workers battled fresh snow yesterday as the death toll from a freezing Christmas weather passed 60. That is very grim news from the northern continental United States. The food bank donations fall despite tsunami of need. That's a terrible metaphor, tsunami of need, but never mind, we get what they mean. Train strikes set to escalate as union plans daily walkouts. We've already covered that one off, of course, and time for Charles to repair a rift with Harry and Meghan, according to a columnist. The Sun has Marcus and Mason back of the net. These two individuals, of course, did us very nearly proud in the World Cup in Qatar. And Clueless, cops drop 1.1 million burglary theft cases in a year. Really is no point whatsoever in calling them. Financial Times, finally, with a very grim picture there. Deadly storm brings chaos in the... I don't know what that picture is. It looks like something out of an absolutely horrific sci-fi movie. Something has frozen over that really shouldn't have. Beijing scraps travel quarantine rules in firm break with zero COVID policy. That is big news and will hopefully start to ease the supply chain crisis. And JP Morgan, blah, blah, blah. So they are the headlines. Let's go back and go through them in some detail now. First one, let's take a look at the Times. Cabinet row over Prevent anti-terror programme. Any of you have any experience with the Prevent thing? It seems to be eternally controversial, doesn't it?
I think that the issue is that at the moment there are so many different stories rearing their heads, and really the only one that everyone's concentrating on is the economy. Now, the government's going to have to put some kind of effort behind Prevent-type policy, but I don't think that focusing on this story right now is at all helpful.
Suella Braverman does seem to have quite, I don't know whether it's a happy knack or not, but she certainly seems to be able to put cats among pigeons, doesn't she?
Well, she does that quite deliberately, and she certainly has done that about immigration. I think really sometimes with immigration that, and she's toned her language down. She had very, very inflammatory language to start with, and she's managed to tone that down.
Do you think that's where Gove has stepped in? Because Gove probably wouldn't have been seen as necessarily a safe pair of hands on these things, but I suppose it's all relative.
Well, I mean, he's a much more measured individual. He's a very intelligent guy and he's a very able politician and he's more measured.
Lousy dancer, but he's a good politician.
Who cares?
Chris, going on to the Telegraph now, Sandhurst urged to tackle toxic culture. Is that the last bastion of toxic culture? I don't know where to send my son now if Sandhurst falls.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me because the army has changed from all recognition from the organisation that I joined in 1975. And
the what? The who? You were in the army?
Well, not at Sandhurst.
But
yes, no,
you're an enlisted man.
Yes,
how far back are we going?
Yeah, 1975 I joined the British Army and I left in 1991.
What sort of regiment?
So I started in Royal Signals and transferred to Army Physical Training Corps for obvious reasons.
Amazing.
And left as a quartermaster instructor, so QMSI.
Was that where you got most of your...
Most of my athletic career was done in the army.
Amazing.
And
you run in heavy duty like flannels?
Without a shadow of a doubt. I used to be in my best bib and tucker and used to get all the guys running around. I used to say, I will never ask you to do anything that I can't do myself, but I'm going to the Olympics next year. Let's go!
Mixed feelings, I would imagine.
Oh, no, they
Who
were
was
really...
that fella, though, the Czech runner, the legendary long-distance runner?
Oh, yeah, that was...
Zatopek. He used to train in army boots.
He did.
He said that would...
He used to train in the laundry, actually, stamping up and down on the... I remember reading that. He used to jump up and down on the sheets. Yeah. But can I just say, because I think this is very important, that we're seeing these stories now about people tackling the toxic culture of sexual harassment. And as a woman, I do get a bit tired of hearing this, because a couple of weeks ago, the report came out about sexual harassment in the fire service. Now, I covered that story as a young journalist on the Daily Mail about the sexual harassment of a woman in Soho Fire Station. I hate to say it, 30 years ago, because I'm an older woman. Nothing changes.
No.
We've got this headline in the Daily Telegraph now, and it's just writing about it. No one's actually doing anything about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure a lot has changed, though. I'm sure a lot has changed in the fire service, in the army. It may not be perfect, but lots has changed. The army that I joined in the 70s bears no resemblance when it comes down to the culture and the inclusion and diversity of the army today.
But where the fire service is concerned, the stories that were put in that report are identical to the stories I covered as a Fleet Street reporter in my mid-20s. Identical.
The difference may be, though, that there are one or two today where there were one or two every single day back in the 70s.
Well, I think Chris makes a very sensible point, because there is still prejudice, I think, in all areas of society. But Chris's point is, one is the scale of it, and secondly, the decision makers are aware of it now, and
but the report did say it was widespread.
Yeah, there's a whole row about diversity officers and so on, but diversity officers are there to try and clamp down on these types of things, ensure that it's as few as possible, and eventually get to zero.
Now, just looking at this, I could pick a couple of stories off the front page of The Guardian, but I'm quite interested in this UK wildlife hitting year of weather extremes. Do we feel that we are actually seeing climate crisis taking effect now? That for some years there's been this sort of sense that it's background noise, but there is, as I was saying earlier, there are certain news events to do with weather and so on. But we are starting to see now perhaps an actual change in the landscape, the British landscape, that's affected by these things.
I think it's definitely true.
Yeah.
So when you say true, so what is true is that climate change is on the agenda, and it's been brought forward in front of our faces with a view of trying to change us to go somewhere. But whether it's man-made or and natural courses of ice ages, etc., we don't know. And that conversation is not being had in public. It's very clear now, as far as those in control are, it's man-made, and you're going to have less of this and do more of that.
But certainly seems GBNews is one of the channels which does try to encourage to hear both sides. I personally think that I'm not brilliantly well-versed in the science, but I'm reasonably convinced that there is a lot of evidence. The odd thing is, though, it's unavoidably the case that most of the people who want to see the big initiatives that would change the way we operate were already kind of fed up with capitalism. They were already kind of in favour of a massive redistribution of wealth to the global south and so on. It's always just rather convenient, don't you think, that there's this, that all these kind of interlocking parts come to the same sort of agenda? I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Not really.
Yeah, I'm not sure, if I may come in, I'm not sure that's entirely fair. If you think about a meteorologist in a university with a PhD, their goal is not to overthrow capitalism. Their goal is to report what's happening. And as you rightly pointed out, with sense of humility, this is for non-meteorologists talking about it. But temperatures are changing. And to give two quick examples, because we're all over the age of 40, when I was a child, it wasn't 40 degrees in the summer. And when I was a child, you had a couple of feet of snow, which certainly in London, you don't really get these days. I do accept there's a lot, it's a different climate in Aberdeen. Climate change is happening. I say it's man-made. But you're right. We've got to have an open debate.
But climate change has always happened. The fact of the matter is that in Elizabethan times, you used to be able to skate down the middle of the Thames. It's always happened.
More recently than that,
yeah. Part of it is natural, part of it is just what happens, and part of it has to be incurred by us industrialisation. I don't think anyone in their right minds would disagree.
I definitely do think that. I've just my issue really is with the programme, which we must therefore endorse, as Chris was saying, which is this is the only way we can get out of it. We have just one last headline to go with, which is the the catastrophic failure of the police force. Is there any point to them anymore these days? It's almost as if burglary has been decriminalised.
Well, there is, but it's a question of resources. The fact of the matter is now that police officers have to go out with a nurse sometimes in the back of the squad car because they get so many suicides, they get so many health issues, they have so much to deal with, and so many other agencies should be stepping to the fore sometimes, and the police are left carrying the can.
Right.
The fact of the matter is there's just not enough resource.
Yeah, we need
resource.
Recruit more policemen, but actually, police people, should I say, but the abuse they get on the streets because of a lack of deference, a lack of respect in the uniform. Who wants to be a police person?
That's as bad as being a politician, isn't it?
Almost.
One word.
No, but not quite.
One word, austerity.
Austerity.
Yeah.
Do you think that'll solve it?
No, that's the...
That's the soundbite. Now, time for another break. But when we get back, my working panel will be revealing their Great Britons and their Union jackasses. We will see you very shortly. Don't go away. It's our last break. See you in a minute.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
And welcome back to our final segment of the night. It's time to reveal today's Greatest Briton and our Union jackass. So let's see who my panel have nominated. We go first to Linda. Who is your Greatest Briton, Linda?
I think at the moment I'm really right behind King Charles.
Good for you.
Because I think that his speech on Christmas Day was very good. It has been criticised for being a little bit anodyne, a little bit too politically naive. But at the end of the day, I think that that particular speech has to be quite carefully calibrated, and he did a good job. He showed a lot of support for people in very troubled times, and I think his delivery was spot on. He's got much, much better at delivering speeches, as we can see from the one that he delivered shortly after his mother died. And I think he's hitting the mark. It might not have set the world alight, but I think he did his job really diligently and really professionally.
I thoroughly agree. And in terms of it being anodyne, I saw earlier on this very channel Nigel Farage and David Starkey were both speaking about it in improving terms. So it's obviously, you know, it's both sides of that. It is interesting, isn't it, how much more confident he's become as a speaker. He used to sort of radiate a lack of confidence, insecurity. Giles Brandreth, who was a sort of biographer of Prince
I
Philip.
interviewed Giles last week. It was really interesting, actually, what he had to say about the royal family.
Go on.
Because he's got quite an intimate knowledge. So his book, which I've read recently, it is really worth buying because it's called An Intimate Portrait of the Queen. But it's really interesting to see his perspective because it's very different to any other book that has come out lately, and it will be
I
very
remember
different.
him speaking. He spoke on stage about saying that Philip always had extraordinary confidence, and as soon as he finished a speech, he goes, right, we're off to now, you know.
Yeah,
whereas
yeah,
Charles
he's
was always,
very good.
oh, God, how do you think it went, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, Peter, who have you gone for?
For the heroes,
Yes.
I went for a national effort. Every household that's taken in a Ukrainian refugee.
Oh, marvellous.
And the reason I said that is because there was a lot of publicity when the scheme started, and of course, sadly, there's about I think about 8 million Ukrainians displaced across the entire continent of Europe.
Yeah.
Britain has done its bit, and I think there was a lot of publicity at the start, but these households are still going on. There's a financial challenge. Accommodating people, space, relationships change, you need to make people feel welcome. I'm sure there have been tough times, but lots of tonight's show, the food bank, the pub, the church has covered community, and this is another great example of that.
It's true that people sometimes underestimate how tricky it's going to be. People have a slightly rosy-tinted view of it, and then they encounter it, and then they adapt and learn to cope.
Yes, it's a tremendous self-sacrifice, really.
Yeah.
And Chris, I imagine you have actually probably held this honour at some point, Greatest Britain, for a matter of a few hours, at least during certain games. But go ahead.
So I've chosen the armed forces. I like the standard operation procedures, military aid to the civil authorities, and when the country needed them, they stepped up. Border control, border force control. They've been fair, firm, friendly, effective, efficient. They deliver the job each time, every time, and things haven't been any smoother. And I just love the way that my erstwhile colleagues, you know, they prepared to the nth degree. They've had on-the-job training in the last couple of weeks, and they've stood up and to be counted, and they've delivered.
Hear, hear. Bravo. Well, I've got to say, all three very worthy, and I thoroughly endorse your choice of King Charles, even though it still sounds bizarre to say those words.
I still have to think twice.
Yeah, and even God Save the King. And the armed forces are obviously always a source of pride. But I'm going to go for those who house Ukrainians for the simple reason that we've had one ourselves on and off for a few weeks, and it's about time we got some bloody credit. So this is for you, Vlad. And he's been honestly absolutely charming. He's been a role model to my kids and a source of great satisfaction to my wife. Or wrong. But seriously, he's wonderful, and if you do get a chance, as I say, recognise it's not always going to be like a bed of roses, but it's extraordinarily satisfying. Linda, your union jackass.
Not that I think that term's a little bit disrespectful, but I have nominated...
I didn't come up with it. It's a Wootton term.
Because I feel a bit nervous, because I'm going to say Prince Andrew.
OK.
And it's quite extraordinary, really, that you would have the Greatest Britain in the same family as Prince Andrew, who I think has behaved abysmally. And I know that he has been censured. I know that he's lost his titles, his military titles. I know that last week he was apparently told to leave Buckingham Palace. But I just cannot understand why anyone in that position just didn't exercise more judgment across the whole year and a couple of years.
So this is an end-of-year jackass?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Because he was in the news this morning for telling somebody to stand on a newspaper to keep their feet warm, which I was possibly erratic, but it didn't strike me as like...
Well, I don't think it's erratic. I think it's entirely consistent, actually, with everything else we've seen.
Yeah.
But I think what triggered my mind this morning was there was quite a lot of coverage of the new play that's going on in London about the Emily Maitlis interview with Prince Andrew, and I think that it triggered something in my mind, and I think he definitely, for me, belongs in that category.
That interview will stand as one of the great toe-curling incidents. I think my toenails had to be extracted surgically from the balls of my feet.
All Emily had to do was let him speak,
yeah.
And he just talked himself into a corner.
Peter?
Well, I don't like calling people a jackass. It seems a bit unkind, even more so at Christmas. But in terms of someone who I feel a bit let down by, Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, I don't want to make everything party political, but if there's a pay dispute with nurses and you go into a pay negotiation or a negotiation without a pay offer, then it's not going to fail. And I think perhaps he's put ideology before patient safety.
Yeah, and this is a lot worse than the railways, isn't it? I mean, you know, people can be disobliged by a cancelled railway service, or apparently we all overestimate how important it is. I was reading recently only something like 6% of journeys in the UK are taken on the railways these days. They're nothing like as crucial to the smooth functioning of the economy.
Depends where you live.
Yes, but hospitals and nurses and ambulance drivers. I mean, this is a very, very serious blow to the government's credibility, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course there is a safety element in the rail dispute as well. But of course, with any withdrawal of service in the NHS, it puts safety and healthcare absolutely the forefront of the dispute. Yeah. And I think it's very sad, but most importantly, I think it's an avoidable strike as well.
And Chris, I imagine you're going to bring a little bit of a facetious...
Well, like these guys, I don't like the term jackass, but there you go, Dan, it's your show. I know you're not, Dan, but I've gone for David Moyes.
Yeah.
He'd kill me, but he's a West Ham manager. And West Ham have had an awful 2022. We've had 5 wins out of 23 games, 19 points out of 23 games. If the season was run in a calendar year, we would be definitely down. While everyone went off to the World Cup, he's had 6 weeks to get our team sorted out. And the definition of sanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. We played Arsenal, who are having a fantastic season, and in the second half, absolutely fell apart because the way we're playing, we cannot play to. And so, sorry, David, I know you went mad when someone called you Moisey. Well, yeah.
But
I've got one better.
He took your team, he took the Irons into a European semi-final, didn't he? Not so long ago.
So when he came, we were in real dire straits. And the then manager, Pellegrini, had got 29 points out of the last 19 games. He's got 23, so we're in worse.
Are you doing all this just off the memory? Have you got notes?
I've got no. But the fact is,
extraordinarily impressed by this.
Because we were talking about Twitter earlier on.
Right.
We're absolutely the last 24 hours. It's absolutely exploded. If you're on a West Ham fan site, absolutely everyone's gone mad because.
As David Moyes, because I remember him, I'm not a big football fan, but he was one of the guys who came in the aftermath of Alex Ferguson and failed.
Yeah, exactly.
He had success somewhere as well, though.
Everton, he did all right at Everton.
OK.
Then tried to go to Man United. They didn't give him enough time. No. Went to took Sunderland down. Went out to
Real Sociedad.
Thank you very much.
I'm always positive. Turn off the internet and come to me.
This is what you gave up Labour list, basically, in order to be able to spend more time with your stats.
He's had a couple of great years with us.
I support Liverpool as a son of a lady from Merseyside. I support Liverpool.
Wonderful. Well, I am going... It's an extraordinarily difficult selection, obviously. I think Prince Andrew has been perhaps Jackass of the Year, but I think he's not been too bad this week, and I think it would be harsh to pick out Barkley, as it is a little bit party political, so I'm going to go with David
Moisey!
And also, it does feel like a jackass. That's an appropriate term for somebody who's failed to achieve, isn't it? And he looks cross with me for saying...
Oh, you're in trouble.
There it is. That is it, and... I've got to say, with football, my big surprise this year is how well the World Cup... I mean, I don't want to, paint over all the human rights abuses or whatever and pretend it didn't happen, but it was a lot more enjoyable as a festival of football than I thought we expected.
A lot of people put that down to the fact there was no alcohol in the
that's
stadium.
Quite interesting. England won the Fair Play Award and their fans were the least arrested ever. I think it's probably because all the gay fans...
they were the least drunk ever as well.
I think the final, though, really played its part.
It was an amazing match.
Absolutely amazing final.
That was the most extraordinary final I've ever seen. Yeah. And the first 80 minutes or so it was all one-way traffic, wasn't it? We could see it was all going to be wrapped up. This was going to be Argentina's shit.
I think France were being managed by David Moyes in the first...
Two wonderful moments. Did you see Salt Bay trying to get in on the action? You know, that fellow... He was pestering Messi. But then equally, Emmanuel Macron trying to comfort Mbappe and being completely ignored.
Yes, exactly.
This is the one day of the year when footballers can just completely ignore people. What did you think of the World Cup in the middle of winter? I think it works. I think blokes like go and see football in the pub.
Massive allegations of corruption. How many migrant workers dead? I love football. Yeah. This is a betrayal of football, Simon.
Yeah, I agree with you.
It shouldn't have been held that they should have made the decision earlier on not to go there. Then we wouldn't have had had all this kerfuffle, would we?
Yeah,
Shouldn't
it's
have
true,
gone
there
there.
was a lot of
Greed,
corruption.
Greed. It was about greed.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. On that note, greed. Byword. Peter, Linda, Chris, thank you so much.
Cheers,
Thank
Simon.
you for watching, folks. It's been a debut for me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I will be presenting Headline as my usual gig in just a few moments. Same jacket, same shirt, same glasses. It will basically be the same gig, but it's a different show, so stay with us through this next commercial break. Stay with us on GB News, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes for Headliners. Thank you very much and good night.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK will see a cold and frosty start for many, but turning wetter in the west. Here are the details. A cold and icy morning across northern Scotland with sleet and snow showers, turning cloudy as rain and hill snow arrives from the south, turning windy too. A wet morning across Northern Ireland with brisk winds developing. The rain could be heavy at times, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. Cloud amounts increasing through Tuesday morning across northern England, the wind picking up too, icy stretches around first thing as the cold air lingers. A cloudy and damp morning for Wales and the Liverpool Bay Area as rain moves in from the west, the rain turning heavy as the morning progresses, temperatures rising after a cold start. A patchy frost across the Midlands Tuesday morning, but temperatures quickly rising as clouds spread in from the west. The risk of rain arriving as the morning progresses, with the winds increasing too. A cold and frosty start for many across East Anglia tomorrow morning, with some morning sunshine. Cloud amounts increasing from the west as the morning moves on, with rain arriving later. A chilly start to the day across southern England, with the best of any morning sunshine in the east. Clouds increasing as the morning progresses, turning windy too, with rain later. Wet and windy weather will continue eastwards through the day, with snow falling over Scotland. Temperatures on the mild side for many.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We